let's talk about the Wake Up Olive movement. Since I started my Bethel series, a lot of you guys have been wanting me to touch on the Wake Up Olive movement because it was the first time that a lot of people started to realize that there was something very wrong with Bethel. So let's get into it. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, in 2019, there was a worship pastor at Bethel whose 2-year-old died in her sleep. Or at least I think so. I don't think that they ever released too many details about what happened. But what we do know is that her parents asked Bethel if they could host a 24/7 prayer type meeting to raise this baby from the dead. This thing spread like wildfire. When I was living in Atlanta, there was tons of posts all over my social media feed of people posting #WakeUpOlive. So everybody in these circles that I knew was posting this, reposting it, and asking for prayer that God would raise her from the dead. And you might be asking, like, where is she at this point? She was in the morgue at this point, and they were praying that she would be raised from the dead. Her mom started to post on Instagram and do daily updates asking for prayer for her baby, and a lot of the posts had this tone of, today's a great day for resurrection. Today's a great day for God to heal, and asking for Bethel affiliated people from all over the world to stand in agreement with them that God was going to raise their daughter from the dead. So while this is going on, national news is starting to pick this up and realize what Bethel is supporting, because Bethel is also supporting this and they are hosting this as well, and they are asking for people to pray. So big news outlets such as BuzzFeed started to write articles about what was happening in Redding. As you can see here, BuzzFeed wrote, the evangelical parents of a young girl who died are using social media to ask for her resurrection. Understandably, people were horrified that this was happening, and they thought that it was incredibly irresponsible and that alarm bells were going off on Bethel at this time, because how could they believe this? Bethel defended themselves, saying that we see resurrection in the Bible and that God tells us that we can do the acts of Jesus. And I mean, that's essentially what their doctrine is at Bethel. Like I've said in previous videos, that they always believe that it's God's will to heal. So it started being phrased as this sort of, won't this be the greatest miracle of all time? And when she is raised from the dead, this will all have been for a greater purpose. And it really took on a life of its own. I was absolutely horrified seeing this in Atlanta, and I was incredibly embarrassed that I was ever associated with Bethel, because a lot of people from my hometown knew that I had gone to Bethel. And then all of a sudden, articles are being written about Bethel and people are knowing that this is the school that I went to. So going back to my relationship with Ted, I was telling him that I thought that it was irresponsible. I was telling him that I felt very bad for the parents. I didn't blame the parents. I believe, and I still don't, that they were in extreme grief, and obviously they are going to cling to any sort of hope that their daughter can come back to life. And I thought that it was incredibly irresponsible of Bethel to be doing this. And I don't know the exact amount of days, I'd have to look it up, but I'm pretty sure it was like seven days they continued this on, where they were hosting meetings to raise her from the dead. So I'm expressing this to Ted, that I think that it is irresponsible and not right. And at this point, I'm already feeling like I don't like a lot of things that Bethel is doing. And to me, this just felt like the final straw. I felt so done with them. And I said they should be setting these parents up with grief counseling rather than what they are doing now. Ted exploded on me, and he told me that my lack of faith, Jubilee, my lack of faith was going to be the reason why Olive was not raised from the dead. And this became a huge fight. He started verbally abusing me, screaming at me, like throwing things off of our counter, because he said that my lack of faith is why she wasn't going to be raised from the dead, and that this was all of my fault. And this really goes into the breaking point between him and I. We just were realizing that we did not see eye to eye on a lot of things anymore. And the further our differences went, the more he just would act out and be abusive. In hindsight, I don't know how much Bethel actually thought that this was a good idea to host these meetings, especially for this long. But I almost feel like they had to because, or maybe they thought that they had to because of the fact that this is their belief system. Like, this is what they've been profiting off of, this entire belief system that God can always heal. God is raising people from the dead. I mean, you have a freaking crew that are the dead raisers. So you mean you got to practice what you preach, and it got them a lot of negative attention. And I think that this was the first time that normal non-denominational churches realized that there was something really, really wrong going on in Redding. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this circumstance and what your experience was of it, because I know even people who were not in Bethel circles were aware of this thing going on in California. So I would love to hear y'all's thoughts about it. But in the next part, I'm going to get back into some of the escalation towards the end of our marriage, and I will soon be getting to the Walt Disney World burger.